I'm Piercy Janwell, and you're listening to Unsubscribed. Every episode, I sit down with business leaders to help you question everything you thought you knew about marketing. If you enjoy this show, please do subscribe and leave a review on YouTube or your favorite podcast player. Now, on to this episode. My guest today is Philine Huizing. Originally from the Netherlands, Philine graduated from MIT with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. Prior to working in venture capital, she worked as a consultant at McKinsey & Company, focused on high growth and transaction strategy. Currently, she's the principal at Insight Partners, where she invests and focuses on both high growth and mature software businesses. I'm honored to say that Philine is our lead investor here at NAC and is also on our board of advisors. Philine, welcome to the Unsubscribe podcast. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Pierre. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's so great. We've got to know each other a lot over the last 6 months, but I'm really excited to learn more about your career and how you became a principal at Insight and got into venture capital. Can you give us a little bit of background just on your journey?
Yeah, no, of course. I think, as is oftentimes the case, it was a little bit nonlinear. But I guess going back to the beginning. So when I was at MIT, I was, a mechanical engineer, and a lot of my internships very much focused on sort of being in the tech world and the tech ecosystem. I think when I graduated from college, I was super excited about going into consulting just because I wanted to get that sort of broad-based, foundation, learning about business, learning, how large businesses run and operate. And I think it was an incredible place to sort of learn, the fundamentals. But I think ultimately I wanted to sort of go back, I guess, to sort of the tech side of things and sort of work with companies that are, at their growth stage versus, very large Fortune 1000 mature companies. And so that's what kind of led me to start looking at other opportunities. And I think for a while, I actually thought that I wanted to join, a growth stage startup and sort of get in at the ground floor there. But I actually came across the opportunity at Insight on our on-site team, which basically, at the time was kind of a dual pronged role for me. Half of the time I'd be spending, with our portfolio companies, helping them grow and sort of helping them with sort of day-to-day operational things. And the other half of the time would be spent sort of evaluating, new investment opportunities and doing diligence and sort of market research and customer research and things like that. So that actually is sort of how I got into the venture capital world via Insight. And so did that for a couple of years. And I think I decided I was actually, much more excited about sort of the investment side of things and wanted to sort of jump into that side, with both feet. And so I moved over to the investment team and have been doing that for the last, 3+ years now. So that's kind of the high level overview of how I got into, where I am today at Insight.
That's awesome. And what advice do you have for someone who might be trying to get into venture capital? Like, do you have any tips on how you get your foot in the door there?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think that when we look at the analysts and the associates that we get super excited about it at Insight, I think oftentimes those are, the ones that have spent some time building network with growth stage companies and sort of developing interesting points of view on markets or, specific tool sets or verticals, that they have an interesting point of view on or are really excited about and can kind of come to an interview process or come to a coffee chat and say like, hey, I noticed, you've been doing a bunch of investments in this space, or like this investment that Insight did, or, whatever other firm that you're talking to did, like is really interesting. I have a point of view in XYZ competitors that, I've looked into and can kind of tell you a little bit more about. So, building that network, coming with a point of view, I think are sort of the two pieces that set folks apart in our interview process. And I think, it's really just a demonstrated interest in the end markets that we spend, 90% of our days looking at, right? So I think to the extent that you can pull that across in conversations, I think that helps a lot.
Nice. And you talked a little bit about, wanting to potentially get involved in early stage startups, working at them, and then maybe more on the consulting side, helping those through insights, portfolio, and then on the investing. Like, what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think hard to answer, and is honestly the best part of the answer, which is that it looks very very different every day. I think like for example, Mondays we have our investment committee meeting, so most of my morning is spent sort of doing that, either pitching companies or sort of listening to other opportunities. But if you take sort of a non-Monday, I'd say a good chunk of time is spent digging into a particular market or a company, whether that's on a live deal or just learning more about specific market dynamics or kind of pulling together a competitive landscape. And we do that by, talking to customers and folks that are actually using a lot of these tools. So it's a lot of customer calls, a lot of market calls, talking to other investors. I'd say, again, a good chunk of my day is spent on, prospect calls. So when, we meet founders and have them pitch the companies and do follow-ups and things like that, that's a huge part of my job. I think the remainder is probably spent working with my existing portfolio companies. And so, whether they have more tactical questions like setting quota for their reps or pulling together their budget for the year, or, helping them interview a handful of candidates for an open role, just, helping them get the support and the resources that they need, whether it's, a call with me or sort of helping them to navigate, the rest of our on-site team and sort of get them the answers and the support that they need. So I'd say it's largely those kind of three buckets.
So you touched on this a little bit, but I'm sure for any of the founders out there, what is it specifically that, you're looking for when someone pitches their company to you?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is understanding, the founder themselves and sort of the unique angle or point of view that they're bringing to a particular market or problem. So, has this person experience sort of firsthand the pain points that they're describing? And if not, like what makes them qualified to sort of offer a better alternative than what customers have right now. So I think that angle and sort of how that comes across and how they're presenting themselves is a huge part of it. And also just trying to understand better, what kind of founder are they? So do they have the sort of charisma and vision that can lead a team, to 10, 50, 500 million of ARR? Are they, a more technical founder, but they're thinking strategically about how to sort of build out that best in class team around them? I think that kind of segues to the second point that I think is really important, which is just, can they attract the talent that they need to be successful? Obviously, the founder and the entrepreneur, they have the vision and they're sort of, leading the charge. But at the end of the day, building a growth stage startup is obviously a team sport. And, we need to make sure that the founder can attract the folks that he or she needs around the table. I think the other thing that we look for, and this also just has to do with the sort of stage that Insight invests in particular, is product market fit. Like, have they figured out how to acquire their customers in a predictable and a repeatable way? Market size is obviously important. I think every VC or investor that you talk to is you can't not mention market size. But I think the other piece that's important is market dynamics. So is it a winner take all market? Is it greenfield? I think all of these dynamics come with their pros and cons, right? Like when you think about greenfield, like sometimes that's music to our ears as an investor, but then you also need to take into account that sometimes that comes with like years of needing to evangelize a product or educating the customer, and so just making sure that the founder really understands those dynamics and sort of has taken into account all of those different considerations and how they're thinking about growing the business. And then I think the last piece, going kind of back to how we think about just evaluating the founder is, are they adaptable, right? Like, have they sort of come with all of these considerations thought through? But then also, there's obviously questions that we ask that, they might not have an answer to, or they might not have thought of. And just, being a bit vulnerable and open and, able to sort of have a dialogue around that, I think is awesome and just a great indication of what that founder would be like to work with, in the longer term.
Yeah, that's great advice. Um, I'm assuming you've probably seen like a million pitch decks at this point.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
lot.
I mean, what are you looking for in there, and what do you think the best ones have? Like, what's most important?
Yeah, I think there's sort of the standard structure really that comes around. Hey, do you start with pitching the problem and the market opportunity, and the go to market and how you're acquiring the customers, kind of those pieces that we mentioned in the previous question. But I really think when I look back and see like, okay, which ones were the best sort of pitches or pitch conversations, I think it's that, right? It's a conversation and less of like a rote kind of walkthrough of a deck. So I think, it's good to sort of come prepared and, have the answers to all the questions, make sure that the deck is structured. But I think the best pitches definitely start out structured and then, get into a conversation and kind of evolve from there. And I think not being afraid to sort of have a real robust dialogue is, I think, what sort of sets things apart. And I think also, helps the founder to evaluate what kind of investor, that person will be. Like, will they just kind of listen and not really provide feedback, or, help to push you and push things forward. So, this is kind of answering more of the question of the pitch conversation versus the pitch deck. But I think just having the flexibility to kind of keep it open and have a dialogue, I think is what makes the best, pitch conversations.
In terms of getting an introduction to Insight or to any venture capital firm, do you think it matters if you get an introduction from someone that you know, or if you just send a cold email in, or if you respond maybe to an associate who's reached out? Like, at the end of the day, does it matter how those people come in, or is it really about the business?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, whether or not we invest, obviously it's the strength of the business and the strength of the founder. But I do think that, if like, for example, if an associate or an analyst from a firm kind of reaches out and is saying like, hey, would love to get on the phone, I think, if, as long as you have the bandwidth for it, I think like definitely have that conversation. Because at a lot of these places, it's the analyst and the associate's sort of job to talk to as many founders as they can and pitch on behalf of your company to our IC. And so, really telling them the story and sort of, getting through the thorny questions, I think will help you in the long run. Because, they want to pitch your company and they, want to get a deal done if they love your business. And so, making sure that they are fully up to speed and can basically pitch on your behalf, I think, will only benefit you. And so, when I look at Insight, I think that some of the best deals have come through analyst and associate relationships and intros that have sort of spanned several years, really. So definitely that's a great avenue. And then I think on the inbound side of things, unfortunately, I do think that the reality is, if I see an email from someone I know, I'm more likely to open it quickly and respond to it quickly and sort of get something on the books. And so I think to that extent, it might help, versus, a cold email, which just might get lost or honestly might get stuck in spam.
Yeah.
But I think, if you get through and can pitch it, then, ultimately the deal is evaluated based on the strength of the company and the strength of the founder, as I said. So, but yeah, I think the warm intro
Yeah.
helps. And I think,
Yeah.
we do a lot of outbounding and
Yeah.
that helps as well. So,
I think that's really important because, as a founder, and I'm sure other founders out there can relate to this, you get a lot of emails from analysts and different firms,
yeah.
and maybe sometimes you're not even looking to raise. It sounds like, though, it is worthwhile to at least have some conversations, even if you're not looking to raise at that time, just to get to know people. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And if there's ever a question of like, hey, do you think that this is a right fit for our company, or like, what kinds of investments does this firm normally make? Like, I think you can definitely do some screening so that, you're making the best use of your time as a founder. But at the end of the day, when we invest in a company, we're planning to work with them for, 4, 5, 6+ years, right? And so I think having the time to get to know, the person that you're about to spend the next 6 years with, I think is a worthwhile investment, right? So um, I would always advocate for starting to build that relationship sooner rather than later. And I think it also just gives you a sense of, how to compare and contrast, right? Like if you have one data point, it's always harder to know, you're making the absolute best decision versus if have spoken to 3 or 4 firms over the
Mhm.
last, year or so, you have a better sense of like which style you like better, which support you feel like you could benefit the best from. So it just, it helps you really make a better decision when it comes time to the actual fundraising event.
This was our first time raising capital, and I will be the first to admit that I knew basically nothing about venture capital. So,
You guys fooled us.
uh, like, I think it would be great to hear from you for the founders out there in terms of like what should founders be looking for? What do you think is important when you're evaluating a venture capital firm?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of just depends on what the founder is looking for, right? Like, I think when we talk to companies, the things that we make sure to emphasize, because we think it oftentimes is pretty important to founders, is like, one, just what the flexibility of the fund is, right? Like, is this a seed stage fund? Is this a Series A type fund? Do they kind of run the gamut and do Series A all the way up through kind of pre IPO rounds? There's obviously advantages to working with all of those different kinds of funds, right? I think seed funds are awesome in sort of getting that product market fit and getting the company off the ground and sort of helping with introductions to great Series A investors. If you're looking for an investor that could potentially lead all of your follow-on rounds, like that's something to consider, and you should think about just the size of the fund and the kinds of deals that they do. So that's one piece. I think Insight, given our large size, I think we offer a lot of flexibility, particularly financial flexibility when it comes to taking positions. So we can do smaller checks, we can do Series B, C, D, follow-on checks, we can do secondary, we can do primary. So if that's important to you, that's something to kind of ask ask the fund about up front. I think the other piece is just trying to understand, what your gaps are, right, on your team, and just understanding whether the fund that you're talking to is able to help you fill those gaps, right? Like whether it's, we have an exceptional technical team, but we need to build out our go-to-market team, or, we have an awesome go-to-market team. We haven't thought about, customer success. Like, how do we think through that? I think if it's important to you to sort of have a sounding board for that, just trying to understand, what kind of support that fund will sort of give to a founder or to a founding team, right, post close. And so, again, I think Insight has done a great job of just investing in our on-site team over the last several years in making sure that our not just our founders, but really the full sort of exec team feels kind of supported in the challenges that they're facing through the scale up phase. And then look, I think the third thing is just, again, going back to the fact that day in and day out, you're talking to a person, right, at the end of the day. And so you just want to make sure that their style matches or complements your style. And, you should talk to CEOs that they've worked with and really get a sense for what it's like to sort of be in the trenches with them. And I think, hopefully everyone will give a glowing review when things are going well, but like, what is it like to work with that person, when you miss the quarter or you lose the deal, or, things are going a little sideways, like what's it like to work with them at that point? And so at the end of the day, like, you are signing on for a partner. And so just making sure that you sort of do that diligence as well, I think is really important.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the on-site team at Insight definitely made a big difference for us. We were looking for really help in a partner who can help us scale the business in all of the different departments. And we definitely talked to some firms that were like, "We'll give you the money, and please leave us alone." That's one thing that I really liked about Insight is that you guys are really there to help support the companies. And I can say it's not just that you say that when you're meeting with the founders, but it actually happens afterwards. So it's been great working together. Um, I'd love to hear just from your perspective when you were evaluating NAC, like what got you excited about NAC and what we were doing?
Yeah, so one of the key things that I think stood out to us about NAC, and really was a testament to the product market fit, was the customer advocacy. So from folks that we talked to in the market, that you guys introduced us to, our own portfolio companies that were using NAC, and then also just our internal marketing center of excellence. I think the reality is that most, or at least the vast majority of enterprises, have a marketing automation platform that's really designed to have admin access for a select group of marketers, and then templates are either custom coded by a dev team or they're outsourced, and then any deviation from that is a whole recoding exercise, followed by a lot of just decentralized approval workflows. And so the fact of the matter is, like, email creation, landing page creation, it currently exists in just outside of pretty outdated like marketing automation platform workflows, and then collaboration kind of occurs kind of in a laundry list of third party vendors, so things like Teams and Slack and Outlook, and obviously there's the whole separate workflow of like the outsourced agencies and developers. And so the fact that you have this tool that's easy to use, easy to integrate, drag and drop, that's super compelling. And so the fact that you have these large Fortune 100 customers that are really reiterating all of these pain points, it's not just something that you can put in a pitch deck. It's really something that the customers are feeling. I think that's the thing that got us super, super excited. So we heard from a customer that again, they have a ton of marketing tech tools, right? And they say, yeah, I'd argue that this is the most important tool in our stack. We have hundreds of marketers who spend almost every day in NAC, and it's the bread and butter of what they do, right? Like that's the kind of quote that gets investors super excited. And so, and particularly, by the way, from a bootstrapped company, which is super rare to see. And I'd also just say, back to sort of my earlier point around how we think about you as a founder and the founding team, like, you guys have lived and breathed this problem before, right? And so I think that also just gives a lot of credibility to the fact that you guys know how best to be thinking about solving this problem. Like, you've been in the customer shoes. So I think all of those pieces together got us super excited, got our IC super excited. And yeah, I think a lot of that has panned out in the 4 or 5 months, I guess, since investment. So yeah, that's just kind of the high level.
Awesome. I'm gonna just go home now. This is my day. That's great. No. Thank you for the kind words, Philine. But yeah, and it's been great, like I said, working together. Another thing that we were looking for is also the experience in the Martech space. I think it's a unique space and has a lot of the similar trends, and obviously selling into marketers and marketing ops people. I know that Insight Partners has quite a few Martech portfolio companies. What is it about Martech that interests Insight?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about either scale up companies or large enterprises, like, marketing is a key piece of the sales and marketing engine that allows companies to scale and grow and achieve hyper growth. And so I think one of the biggest just things that is constantly being optimized in marketing is ROI and cost, and managing that and making sure every lead that you're getting is done in the most efficient way, right? And so it's a key piece of the go-to-market engine that grows a company, and it's the piece that I think requires the most sort of optimization, and oftentimes gets the most critique, I guess, at the board level of like, hey, are we doing this as efficiently as possible? Are we reaching the folks that we want to be reaching? What can we do to optimize further? And so I think marketing is really shifting to become a very analytical function, when in the last 10 to 15 years it probably wasn't as much. And so as a result, I think there's just a lot of interesting tools and software products that are sort of coming around marketing teams to sort of help make sure that things get optimized. And so there's obviously a lot of noise, right? Like, I think martech gets thrown around as a buzzword a lot, and I think it gets hard for marketers to sort of figure out, which tools do I need, which tools, will really help improve my overall tech stack. And so I think the things that we look for in particular are, clear, hard ROI, whether that's from a cost perspective, from an efficiency perspective for the marketers, increased conversion, things like that. Like that's the thing that sort of gets us excited about MarTech. And so I think, when going back to what got us excited about NAC, the fact that you can, get rid of just hours of collaboration that, isn't really going anywhere, and sort of, give that time back to the marketers, give that creativity back to the marketers. Like those are hard ROI dollars. And again, that's hard to find. And I think, gets us excited about the category and NAC in particular.
I mean, one look at Insight's website and your portfolio companies, or, looking at the new $20 billion fund that you just closed, you obviously have an incredible track record and reputation. What do you think the key factors are there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a couple of things that I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's really, focus and flexibility, right? Like we've been around for over 25 years, and throughout that history, we have largely been focused on, B2B enterprise software. So that is our bread and butter. It's what we know best. And it's what, everyone has at Insight has spent the majority of their careers, trying to understand. So there's a lot that comes with like, hey, we've seen this story before. Like we've helped to build, scale enterprise software businesses. But then I think the other piece that goes along with that is just the flexibility, right? I think given our fund size, we can offer an entrepreneur a lot of flexibility as it relates to like, leading their Series A, leading their Series B, C, D, pre-IPO, right? Like we're their partner for the next 5+ years. And then again, I think, as they're considering other, potential pathways, like Insight can offer secondary or primary or, different kinds of structures. And I think there's a lot of appetite to make, our investments as founder friendly as possible. So I think that's one sort of unique piece. The other piece that I mentioned is just, the on-site team that we've spent the last decade really investing in and scaling. And I think that's also just a testament to just being adaptable as a fund. I think, when I started on the on-site team, the team was 15 people max, and now it's well over 100. And I think the strategy has also changed a little bit as well, right? Like we've now specialized into more functional areas. So you have a marketing center of excellence, a product center of excellence. And I think that is in direct response to just asking our portfolio companies like, hey, what kind of support is the most helpful for you? Like, how would you like to consume that support? And really just, taking that input and investing, right, and scaling that piece of the organization so that we can really help our entrepreneurs, post close. So I do think that while a lot of funds say that they have a value add platform, I think Insight has done a really great job just scaling that and just making sure that the feedback from our portfolio is incorporated to make that as effective as possible. And then the third piece I think is just at the end of the day, like we hire great people, and ultimately they're great to work with. They're intellectually curious. They're fun to hang out with. They're just good people to sort of have in the trenches with you. And I think, again, at the end of the day, like these are people that you're choosing to work with as a founder, as an investor. And so I think, making sure that we maintain that culture and make sure that our investors and our on-site team are people that founders love to work with. Like that's super important. And I think, we've tried to maintain that, even as we scale.
Yeah, you definitely walk the talk there. We have got so much value from the different center of excellences and everyone at the Insight team. It's just been great having, not needing to know all of the answers anymore and having someone to come in when we have questions. All right, this next section we do with everybody. It's kind of our rapid fire section. The first question is, what's one marketing trend that you would unsubscribe from?
I guess this is kind of as a consumer, like SMS promotions, like the 10% off things that come in your text after you've purchased something. Is I literally just got three of them as we were as we were talking. So yeah, I guess I'd unsubscribe from that.
In your opinion, is email dead?
Based on how I'm spending the majority of my day, no.
We're big believers in work-life balance at NAC. What do you do for fun?
Also a bit of a cliche, but I love to travel. So, I mean, I actually took 6 months off to travel when I was 25, which was, not a great thing to further your career, but it was awesome. And we actually were just catching up on this, but 2022 is also the year of weddings, it would seem. And so, that's taken us from New Orleans to Dallas to Amsterdam, LA. So fortunate to be able to get out to most of those this year as well.
Awesome. Who is one person that you admire in the business community and why?
Um, so funny that this is like a business question, but like Serena Williams
Mm.
is probably the person I'd say. And I think, I grew up playing tennis. And so she's always just been the most incredible, like, North Star of athlete goals, obviously. But I actually just love the way that she's kind of pivoted and started her own investing business. So she has a fund called Serena Ventures. And it's basically like it's leveraging her network and her own unique point of view in the market to back early businesses and broaden the ecosystem of folks that get access to venture funding and that write checks into the venture ecosystem. And so I think people like her are just doing awesome things for our industry. So yeah, I picked Serena.
Nice. What's one piece of career advice that you've picked up over the years that might help others?
Yeah, I think being adaptable and really defaulting to trying to just figure things out. So I'll explain a little bit. So, I mean, I've been thrown into like so many projects or scenarios, whether that's at McKinsey or Insight, where I felt just like a bit out of my depths. Like, oh, I've never looked at this kind of business before. I've never built this kind of model, or I've never done this solo meeting. But I think oftentimes, the people that are giving you these opportunities think that you're ready, or at least, 80% of the way there. And so, I think just remembering that you don't grow if you don't get uncomfortable. And so just buckling down and figuring out something on your own to me is what keeps things interesting and keeps me learning. But it's also, again, what makes you grow. So then the next time you get thrown into that, you'll know what you're doing and can kind of go in a bit more confident and ready to take on the next curveball. But I think just, really defaulting to just trying to figure it out yourself, I think has brought me pretty far. So,
Amazing. And last one, who else should we interview on the Unsubscribe podcast?
oof, great cue. I think it'd be cool if you guys interviewed some folks from our. Okay, so two-pronged answer. Either one of your larger customers, so that they can back up all of these great things that I've been saying
Hmm.
about NAC. But also, I think it'd be awesome to interview some folks from our marketing center of excellence and sort of get their take
Yeah.
on what they're seeing, boots on the ground at a lot of these scale up companies, both the ones that are providing martech solutions, but also the ones that are consuming martech solutions. Like they're helping suggest tooling every day just based on what they're hearing from our portfolio companies. So I think that would be a pretty interesting point of view to get on here.
Yeah, I love that. We've had a few customers on, or we've had Citrix and Palo Alto networks on, and definitely have some more coming up. And I'd love to chat with Meg or Dustin. I'll definitely be emailing them after this.
Good. I'll give them a heads up so they don't so they don't shout at me, but I'm sure they'd be happy to.
Philine, thank you so much for doing this. This has been amazing hearing your story about how you got into the VC world. How, for founders out there, advice on what to do when you're pitching someone and what they look for, both in your deck and your personal story. It was great hearing about your take on NAC and kind of the state of MarTech and why Insight Partners is interested in that. And also just great to hear some points around insight and really what makes them different as a firm. I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners did as well. Philine, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Unsubscribed, a podcast created by NAC. If you enjoyed this episode of Unsubscribed, be sure to subscribe to my podcast and leave a review on your favorite podcast player. If you have any feedback or want to chat, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter at marketing_101. Cheers.